Hi, everybody. Okay, so we are at 1,480. Let's plug everything in. I'm very late, sorry. Um, it's been a busy day. We got a lot of stuff happening, a lot of information coming in, a lot to decipher. I think that is the most challenging part of this is deciphering all the information coming in and organizing it. Um, and making sense of it legally because the battle is a legal battle, and that's why the media is so important, because the media influences the policy, right? The media influences how court cases, um, uh, uh, how they shift, how they what happens in them. It's and I wish I had the right words to express, like on a podcast, just be really quick-witted and say everything just right legally. But I hope that you understand what I'm saying, that when you have stories written. Ooh, that was loud. Okay. That's interesting how that came on. That's very new. So, I can see comments now, and thank you so much. And let's start over. 1,480 days since Richard was premeditatedly murdered on Fort Bliss. On Fort Bliss. He was never missing. He was never missing. He was code red. He was premeditatedly forced out of the barracks, right? Forced out of the barracks to a location where they murdered him. And then they dishonored his corpse. Okay? They messed with his corpse. And they never contacted us. The unit never contacted us. They went into silence and when and other things, but they never investigated Richard's disappearance. And we have proof with that because Jay Paulin wrote on the 3rd of September that they don't look for missing soldiers, meaning that they never looked for Richard. Now, this is really important. This was when Vanessa Guillen's search was going on at Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, and they found uh, the soldier Wendell Morales. When they were looking for her, who was also deceased. This was all happening at Fort Hood, going on. Um, and people were losing their jobs and everything. It was crazy because her body was found at the very end of June, announced at the very beginning of July of 2020 that it was her, dismembered, burnt body that had been buried in that foxhole under um, lime, under concrete, that animals were trying to dig up, that the line people found, that they had been searching. They were so close to, but that the CID called off the search because they never wanted anyone to find her remains. And they never, who knows where Richard's remains are, if they are in a hole. We don't think they're in a hole, right? We know that they're dismembered because of the autopsy reports. We know from witness accounts, and we know that they have Richard's remains because of witness accounts, not just one, multiple. Um, And so this cover up of this murder, Richard was never missing. Richard was never AWOL. Richard was never a deserter. Never. Richard has a totally clean record. And it is interesting how some of the unethical reporters and journalists in the media will defend the most vile criminals and yet smear and attack a young soldier that was murdered, that has a totally clean record, was distinguished honor graduate and basic training in AIT. And they don't mention that. I have to mention that. I have to be the one that mentions that on these live streams. And that's why I asked you to share these live streams, because they're so important. And when we got to El Paso, and my dad came, and I just posted up this really amazing experience. And I've had in my life a couple of these experiences, right? And the latest one is with my dad. I just felt my dad's presence, and it was very comforting, you know. I'm going to cry. um, it was just very comforting, and justice is near. You know, my dad knows, and Richard, they know where the remains are. And to have that experience with my dad close like that, no worries. No worries. We're going to absolutely get Richard's remains back. This is all coming together. And really on, you know, in the same time, sorry, it's just so emotional when you have an experience like that, because it's not just, you know, it's like it's even the smell, you know. And I don't know if people have had that in their life where you can feel a person's presence so close to you that you can even smell them, right? Because we remember how people smell. I mean, anyway, so I posted that up. You can read it, and that's why I'm coming on a little bit late, because I just wanted to take a few minutes to formulate my thoughts, my words on that experience today, in regards to Richard, and post that up for people to understand that the battle, it seems so daunting sometimes, you know, and so evil and so difficult. But when God is with you, when you have the angels, and you know, the other day I was listening to this amazing podcast. I'll just put on a podcast when I want to go for a walk and try to do something very different. Listen to something very different, not politics, just something very different, just to have a touchstone. You know, a touch. It's kind of like going out right now in my garden. I have figs that are ripe, and if you can get to them before the squirrels or the birds, because they're so sweet, they're so nice, they're even a little bit citrusy. You know, they're just wonderful when you can eat them right off the tree. Um, you know when the time is right. That's it's a touchstone that nobody is in control but God alone, and nothing I can do to make that tree, harvest twice a year or whatever. it's all in God's timing. And so I listen to things that just get away from all of the psychological warfare, right? The asymmetric, the professional asymmetric psychological warfare that we're in every day, and they're even leveling at our children. I've known that for a long time. That's why I decided to homeschool, because I was a teacher, and I'd be like, uh, this curriculum seems so strange to me. What's going on here? I don't think this is good for our children. Um, and so, when it came time um, to be a mother, to be a wife, be a mother, have a family, all of those good things. Matter of fact, it's our anniversary tomorrow. Rob and I will be married 36 years tomorrow. Thanks be to God. Amazing. We met in a blind date in March, and by August we were married. We got married. It's just 1988. We met in March. We got married in August. And anyway, so when it came time, um, after we had children and they were school aged and everything, they went to school for a while. They went to German school for a while, and just trying different things. What can we do for our children to relieve them of this asymmetric warfare, of this asymmetric professional psychological warfare, and give them a touchstone, um, the cornerstone touchstone, so that they can move through life and psychologically healthy, right? And so Richard was psychologically healthy. He was, of course, physically healthy, but psychologically healthy. And, you can say, well, but they murdered him. Um, yeah, because he was psychologically healthy. He he knew what was right and wrong. He knew what you stood for, and he knew that you can't lose your soul. They can kill the body, but they can't kill the soul if you're psychologically healthy and in the right with God, right? When you're in the right with God, um, you don't have any worries. You don't have any worries. So there's a lot of people that are walking dead, right? They are alive, so to speak, but they're really walking dead. They're just so miserable psychologically. They have no touchstone. They have no cornerstone. Um, they are slaves. They are slaves to the system. They're slaves to the asymmetric warfare tactics. They're slaves to the criminal um, network. Absolutely. And some of them, they've been born into it. I mean, I can't even tell you that I understand what they're going through. I can't. I can't tell you what, and I don't feel better than them or anything like that. I just I just pray Christ have mercy, because they're born into this criminal enterprise and groomed to be criminals. And we've seen so many that are also, uh, that grooming rubs off, right, on people that are trying to do really, trying to be in law enforcement and everything and trying to do the right thing. And then they're not even allowed to do the right thing psychologically and socially, right? Because they're in real danger with the evil that's around them. And so for Richard to do what he did was so incredibly brave. And he probably saw some of the most evil things. And he told me, he said, Mom, it is so bad. It is so bad. So for him not to, like, if they were smoking pot, he'd say, "Oh, they're smoking pot," or if they were stealing some weapons, "Oh, they're stealing some weapons." But he didn't, he couldn't say it because what was going on was so bad, quote unquote, so bad. And so, Richard was very connected to my dad, and my mom. And you saw that with the letter that he wrote to Omi and Opie from basic training. And he didn't even tell them that he was going to be the distinguished honor graduate. They didn't even know that he was going to be distinguished honor graduate until they got there, until the ceremony, until the ceremony, and he wrote them to kind of give them a date, and he was so excited, and I posted that letter, and it just tells you his character. And he was so excited about being Army. He even drew a picture on the back with Army. Um, you know, he was very healthy psychologically. And that letter shows you how firm, how healthy his mental health was. And I'm so grateful for that. Um, and the people that have met him, um, and our uh, investigation, they would tell us, "Oh my gosh, he was so sweet. He was so sweet. What? Oh my gosh, what did they do to him? He was so sweet." And so he absolutely was amazing and brave for going against the social pressures, the criminal pressures, the retaliation, withstanding the constant and severe retaliation, the humiliating retaliation, to be demoted 3 ranks in one go. Um, Sets him up for so much humiliation and bullying. You wouldn't even believe it. You wouldn't believe it unless you go through it. And we've, talked to so many soldiers, and the absolute language is just vile and vulgar. And, and then to find out the information that we found out now, um, because Richard's case depends on a law enforcement, um, a criminal justice system um, doing their job, obeying their oath, caring for their community, caring for their future, for their children, wanting to stop the grooming, stop the criminal network grooming, the influence of the mental health disease that comes out of these criminal networks that absolutely tries to make you believe it's okay to be a thief, to be a rapist, to be a pedophile, to be uh, a fraud, waste, and abuser, right? A fraud, waste, and abuser, to take advantage of the system, to be a liar, to be a false witness, um, to be an adulteress, to be or adulterer, to be so disrespectful to your legacy, which means not honoring your parents. And I'm going through in my mind the Ten Commandments, to dishonor God, um, to not remember what He has made for us, and that goes to this podcast that I was listening to, and they were talking about what water is, and it was like, ugh. Absolutely. I have to listen to this because I am so fascinated by water and what water is. And they started talking about, how it's so important for everybody, and our leadership knows that. And if our leadership loved us, if our leadership was benevolent, if our leadership cared about our mental health, if our leadership cared about our physical health, and they don't really talk about that too much. They don't talk about it. And, if they cared about it, then they absolutely would release the water. They would release the water, and they absolutely control the water right now. They absolutely allow the water to be polluted, for the polluted water to be given to us, to be our tap water. They allow uh, the all the technology that they have to structure the water. When you structure water, it filters it. You don't need to put it through a filtering system. You just need to structure it. And if you structure it, and that's from Austria, there was an Austrian that really studied water, and it's really fascinating. Schorberg, you can look him up. Um, and if they really wanted to clean water, they have the technology to do that. They could do it so cheap, so cheap. They wouldn't have to spend money uh, on poisons. Um, but then this podcast went further because, if they really wanted to, they could do it, and then they could release the water, the clean water. We would be so much healthier. Our hair would be healthier. Our skin would be healthier. Our organs would be healthier. Our eyesight would be healthier. We would be so much healthier. We, especially if they would release it in the magnitude that it's available, it would be so cheap. And, we wouldn't blink an eye to wash things, and our plants would be healthier, so our food would be healthier, everything would be healthier. Water is so, so important. And then they went further with this water, that it records. It records, and it has memory. It's like a it's like a hard drive, and it remembers. And I'm thinking, wow, look at this information that we're getting in. We just got a recording of Bill Hicks engaged in uh, official or oppression. What do you call it? Official oppression. Um, uh, and I would call it, that he's on the take, right? That he's trying to stop legal things from happening, the oversight from happening, the access to open records, so that an ethical journalist can call him out for being, uh, a usurper, right? Because he was not installed properly. He did not take his oath of office properly. He was not installed properly. Therefore, he is illegitimately in that position, and that makes him a usurper. Okay? And people just can't not follow the law when you're supposed to be a district attorney and uphold the law, right? Establish the law. That's what he's supposed to be doing, and prosecute those who break the law. This is such a huge problem. And so here we have a recording of that. Isn't that wonderful that that's a memory, a recording? We have it, and we can use it as evidence. And here I'm listening to this podcast that's saying water records. Water has a memory. And they talk about all the different experiments. And, I don't know if you're familiar with some of the experiments. There's a really good one that has some great visuals, and that's a scientist in Japan that does this experiment with water, with rice, and of course with freezing water, um, uh, and getting that memory in the ice. Um, it's just amazing experiments, because we know that water has energy. And now, here they were discussing, and I don't want to go into it. um, Please search it out yourself. Don't believe me, but I'll just make you aware of it, and you can do what you want with that information. But, you have a recording of Bill Hicks, calling the Secretary of State, and, trying to scheme, really, to scheme to thwart the system. He's trying to get over on us. That's what that means. And to cover up that he is illegitimate. And that hurts our son's case. That hurts so many cases. It hurts so many cases. And here we have proof of it, because it's recorded. It's a memory. And I'm listening to water being a memory, having a memory. And then they start talking about, is water God? Is water God? Because they were of the belief that even the clouds are sentient. Like they believe the stars are sentient. And they go and discuss that. I mean, it was the most fascinating discussion, whether you agreed with them or not. That there's like this, that the clouds, and I've never even thought about this. And I called my mother up this morning right away, because my mom is always looking at the clouds. My mom is always fascinated with the clouds. She loves to paint clouds. She always says, let's paint that cloud. These clouds, right? That they have, they perceive, they are something, right? And for them to say, I believe the clouds are sentient, it was like, wow. Well, I need to tell my mom this, and have this beautiful discussion about the memory of water, and the clouds, and different stars, um, and just take our mind off of these evil people that think they can get better than that. That they can, so I think their argument for water being God, God is, but not limited to, right? God is, but not limited to. The Holy Spirit is, but not limited to. Every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God, um, the sacraments, and creation. So I think it would fit right in there with creation. And to, I'm just so, I'm so happy that we can record things, that history is being recorded, whether these unethical journalists and law enforcement agents try to manipulate history, right? And then we're like, oh my gosh, they're telling us lies. They're going to tell my children lies. What kind of future are we going to have? But God has that covered. And here we have this recording of Bill Hicks, And it is so important for our son's case and for many other cases, because he is botching the entire criminal justice system in El Paso. He has to be called out. And we are just waiting. for it to break, because it's going to break. Because they cannot rewrite history. They cannot, no matter how hard these unethical journalists like Bob Moore of El Paso Matters, like Jules Tuganon Chan, who doesn't even call himself a journalist. Sorry. It was really emotional with my dad. The memories and the encounter, right? But the unethical journalists like David Candelara, like Natasha Paloma, can you believe it? That's a hard one for me because, she gives you all this pretense, this pretense of this kindness, right? And she's the opposite. She's the opposite. It's heartbreaking to see people act out so well what they are not. She is absolutely an unethical journalist. She's out of that work now, thank God. Thank God. And maybe she had to sign something where she couldn't speak up, but she absolutely knew what happened in KTSM. She absolutely knows Danae Katzen, absolutely knows Jonathan Ambrose, absolutely knows Patricia Valdez, absolutely knows what Daniel Hernandez, absolutely knows what's going on in KTSM, and and how they targeted us, how they targeted our son's case, and here we are. We have a recording. Well, one, we acquired FitFam El Paso LLC. We're still trying to figure out what to do with that. We're still trying, it's like, let's just put that on the shelf for a while because we want to get our son's remains back. We want to hold these perpetrators accountable. But the main reason, and it's been asked, and we're very grateful to journalists that have approached us now that want to talk about FitFam, our acquisition, taking over, whatever you want to call it. Is it a hostile takeover of FitFam El Paso LLC with the brand names? When they brutally murder your son and they, well, let's say not that they did it, but when your son is brutally murdered, let me say this right, and you absolutely have determined that they are in cover-up mode, and this is a criminal group, and the criminal group is part of the original response team, and they are working with the media and using social media to smear and put out false stories that obstruct the justice, obstruct our family from getting to the truth, obstruct our family from getting our son's remains. They obstruct the criminals from being held accountable while attacking our son, who doesn't even have a criminal record at all. Totally clean. Totally clean. And that all, remember how all that came about with the Interpol, right? They wanted to mislead us into believing that our son had done something wrong. And they did that to Anthony Swafford. Remember the military police officer who they did a psyop on. They did a professional asymmetric psychological hypnosis on Anthony Swafford to think of the character of our son. And I'll never forget this. I know what kind of character Richard Halliday is. He said it like, and I'm like, really? You know him? I was told. Really? Who told you? Guard mount. Guard mount? Wow. Um, wow. That means that was CID. That means, who is that guard mount? I want to know that. I really, that's one of those little things that I'm really itching to know. Who was standing at that guard mount? Would Anthony Swafford ever tell us that? Anthony Swafford, if something like, God forbid, something like this ever happened to one of your children, would you want to know on guard mount to smear your child unjustly, so that you couldn't get their remains, that you couldn't get uh, the perpetrators held accountable, that you couldn't, we have to reestablish Richard's character officially. We know he's a hero. We know he's brave. He was brave. We know his character, but it needs to be official. And that's why, even after the declaration of death, the official declaration of death of Richard, it wasn't over. They thought it was over. But we need to officially get history right. Officially write it down that Richard was a whistleblower and he was retaliated for standing against this criminal network, and he was stood tall. They could not succeed with everything that they did. They could not succeed in moving him to tarnish his own reputation, his own character. They couldn't. He stood up against them, um, humbly, humbly, and you saw that. At least I saw it. You only partially saw it. Some people saw the whole thing, when he was confronted by the frame job officers in the parking lot at midnight, a traffic stop in a parking lot at midnight, that they didn't even have a probable cause. They didn't even have a probable cause to do what they did. And the body cam footage is so beautiful of Richard. It totally goes against the narrative, what they were telling us in these meetings, you know. And they so that really is proof. That's a recording. It's a recording. It's beautiful living water. It's a recording of Richard. It's history. And now we have a recording of Bill Hicks. And don't forget, we have the recording of Nadal Baim and the cashier, the beautiful cashier. Um, so those things, they can't change them. And there are lots of recordings, y'all. It's not just those recordings. So there are lots. And, listening to that podcast, I was like, wow, water is God. That really makes you think about baptism in a whole different way, right? I mean, let's do some Bible studies now with that in mind. when it comes to water and walking on water. Why could Jesus walk on water? Why are we baptized with water, into water? Um, why living water, right? It just makes you think so differently when you know that water has a memory and is recording. Is recording. Uh, that just blows me away, and I wanted to share it with you, and you can tell me what you think, um, and share this. And we are energized by that. And energized. I don't know why I had this experience with my dad. My dad's spirit, um, energized by that. Just the positive vibes of it, right? Um, and then tomorrow being our anniversary, um, well, I'm always happy to see that day come because it's like, woo, we made it, we made it. um, so you've got to celebrate those beautiful little victories and what's going on with the DA's office, what's going on with FitFam, what's going on um, with all of our, because I was writing so many letters today with Rob and submitting them again, and we're getting faster, which is really good. At the beginning, it was like once a week, but now we're writing several a day. Um, and there's so many things happening with the judges, okay? Uh, so, and of course, Bill Hicks was a judge, right? Veronica Escobar was a judge. Bill Hicks and Veronica Escobar totally are collaborating. I can tell you that right now. Veronica Escobar and Bill Hicks, total collaborators. All right. So the recordings, the open records, they are such a blessing. And what was Bill Hicks wanting? He was wanting to scheme to stop access to open records. That's what he wanted to do so that they would not have the evidence that we have, that he's a usurper of the 34th Judicial District Attorney's Office. He tampered with official records. He's a criminal, and he's collaborating with Veronica Escobar. And isn't it something that Veronica Escobar, who now we have absolute proof that she's collaborating with Bill Hicks, a criminal, was also collaborating with Mario A. Raskin Ortiz, the El Paso medical examiner, who is illegal and unqualified. He's illegitimate also. So Veronica Escobar is collaborating with to have illegitimate officials that are the most important positions, those two positions, the district attorney and the chief medical examiner, to get criminal justice in El Paso. You ruin those and you have a mess, a total mess. So for the sake of El Pasoans, for the sake of people in Juarez, Mexico, because these are Siamese sisters, okay? People have family on both sides. On both sides, even when I was a girl. And it was much more, there wasn't a border issue when I was little that I can remember, because it was a kinder. It was like people in Juarez had it better. And so why would you want to why would you want to move over to the United States or vice versa, right? But then as things got worse and poor and all of that, then you have all this and then you have free stuff and whatever. Um, just bad policies. Bad policies. Mexico is absolutely beautiful and ancient, and El Paso is beautiful and ancient, and there's no excuse. We should all be doing well. And they control water. These evil criminal network. There's, when I was younger too, the Rio Grande had a lot more water than when I was there, going back and forth for Richard. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened to all the water? There used to be a lot of water. They're controlling the water because it's not like we don't have water. We have so much water. Water is plentiful, and it's a psyop to say that we don't have water. Okay, it abs. Sorry, absolutely. We have the technology to bring the water to El Paso. Um, Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. So, and what did I want to say? I lost my track a little bit. Um, but for the sake of El Pasoans, for the sake of those that live in Juarez, Mexico, you need to share this information because it's going to be a government by the people, for the people, of the people that is going to drive the authorities, drive the law enforcement to do the right thing. And that is to arrest Bill Hicks. He has to be arrested. He's a criminal. He has botched so many cases. That means he's hurt so many people. And he's absolutely hurt us. And the same thing goes for Mario Raskin Ortiz. He absolutely cannot be in that position. He's not qualified. And if we don't, and this is not me saying it, this is the Texas Constitution, the beautiful Texas Constitution, and the Texas Code, right? That's what's saying it. And if we don't follow our laws, why do we even have laws? If we can just weaponize them whenever we want to hurt people and then, just throw them away for criminals, why do we even have law? And then there's no decorum and there's no social foundation. There's no social foundation then. And then there's just chaos. And with chaos comes the falling down in the big black abyss where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's what happens. And we have so many like Richard that have been murdered, raped, trafficked, killed by fentanyl or other results from this evil criminal network. And so many families are hurt. And I've told our children, it is hard work to be a mom and dad. It is hard work. Children are they're difficult because they take so much time and love and discipline, and they take so much of yourself. You have to be so selfless because they have to be cleaned, they have to be educated, they have to be fed, they have to be made healthy, they have to get mental love and beauty for mental health. It is very difficult work, and our government makes it even more difficult for them. So we as Gigi, I'm known as Gigi, we try to help as much as we could, but then they make our older people very unhealthy, and then they can't really help. I mean, the whole breaking apart of the family is is such an assault. And then they just want to give you an easy out. Oh, just do what you want to do, you know, uh whatever. Follow your desires. And it's like, really? Really? That's not how the world works. We are, it's kind of like parrots. We are social creatures. We have to build our family, and we have to build a healthy family. And when this all started and Richard was being smeared and speared, and we're like, what? And our family is like, what's going on? What's going on? And I'm like, my eldest grandson, he's Richard's godson. And I'm like, no way am I going to leave that kind of legacy with my grandson when I know that something stinks here, that something is not right. And I'm supposed to just look the other way and let them smear my son to my grandson? And he'll have to grow up thinking that his Uncle Richard um, had some kind of criminal history or whatever, when absolutely he's a distinguished honor graduate for basic training in AIT and has no criminal record at all. And brave standing up to these criminal traffickers and was a whistleblower. That's the truth. And that needs to be officially admitted and documented. And I don't know, God just gave us the energy to make sure that our grandchildren knew who Uncle Richard was, and that his siblings knew what really happened to Richard, what surrounded that. And that makes for a healthy family when you know the truth. And it'll be even healthier when we get Richard's remains. And the fight for Richard's remains is necessary. Because for them to just admit that he died on Fort Bliss and then to say, there you go, that's all you need to know. No, where's his remains? Do not tell every veteran out there that you can be murdered on home, American soil, on a military installation such as Fort Bliss, with how much money do they spend on security, right? To secure that military installation. We're like $35 trillion in debt, and we're not secure. Our roads are not, they're not silver and gold. I mean, $35 trillion. We should have the best roads, the absolutely best bridges, the best dams for the best and cleanest water that keeps history. That keeps history for us. I mean, that blows my mind. We should have for $35 trillion, but we don't. That should be a wake-up call. And how in the world can veterans look the other way when one of their own was murdered on Fort Bliss and they say they don't have his remains? When I know they have his remains. And we have witness testimony they have his remains. And it's documented that they have his remains. And they scheme to what do you call it when a judge seals the case? Seals access to open records. Let me scheme like Bill Hicks. No, we don't want that. We don't want the scheming. We want open, transparent records. And thanks be to God, we've got Bill Hicks recorded trying to scheme. You're the one I need to talk to, because this guy out of Austin got the ear of a journalist and some attorneys here in El Paso, and you're the one I need to talk to. And because of having the rest of the open records, he absolutely wanted to block access to his statement of officer and his oath of office and the timestamps that show that he is not properly installed, that he did not take his oath of office properly, and that he is not a legitimate district attorney. He couldn't even install himself properly, and that he tampered with the timestamps, or schemed to have the timestamps tampered with, and he's a usurper, a trespasser. So that's a lot of information tonight. And thank you. Water is cleansing. Yes, water is cleansing. If they cared, they want to pay CVS or Walgreens or whatever, oh yeah, we'll give you this in the arm, right? We'll get funding for that. But wait a minute. If you just give everybody good, clean, structured water, and plenty of it, and they have the technology to do it, and it's cheap, and it's and that's why, right? And it would, it would be so loving. It would be very loving. It would be benevolent. And the reason why I'm using those words is because they're not. They're the opposite. And they work with these unethical journalists like Bob Moore, like David Candelara at KTSM, and Natasha Paloma, and the Real Fit Fam El Paso, who they weren't benevolent. They wanted to be Mr. X. They wanted to be epic in the hiding, right? In hiding. They wanted to block access to a transparent government. What do you call that? That's not American. It's not the Texas Constitution. It's not the U.S. Constitution. And therefore, they are breaking our law. So that's really, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for coming on so late. Here we are. Happy anniversary, dear. I love you, dear. Happy anniversary. 36 years. Absolutely wouldn't have wanted to be with anybody else. So, yeah, we're burning the midnight oil. Okay, everyone, thank you. Share, and I will be back tomorrow, God willing. Bye bye, everyone.